In the 21st century, nothing is more dangerous than ignorance. And the most dangerous kind of ignorance for Jews is ignorance of Islam. Islam has a lot to say about various groups, Jews, Christians, polytheists, women, and so on. And it's important for these groups to understand what Islam says about them, because what Islam says about them will have an ever-increasing impact on their groups as Islam spreads. The Quran contains numerous verses about Jews, some nice and some not so nice, and the Quran's claims about Jews have been affecting Jewish-Muslim relations for 14 centuries. For Jewish viewers who would like to know what Islam says about them, but don't have much time to study the Muslim sources, I've put together the shortest possible list of relevant Quran verses. There are dozens of Quran verses about Jews that we could examine, but we're going to focus on just 3, all from the same chapter, Surah 5. Keep in mind that we'll only be talking about what Islam, an ideology, claims, not what a particular Muslim believes. If you're a Jew, you may have a Muslim friend or coworker who's the nicest person in the world and who has no problem with you or with your religion or with Israel. We're not discussing what individuals believe. We're discussing what Islam teaches. And we can get a nice overview by reading just 3 verses. Our first verse is Surah 5, verse 32. Even if you've never studied Islam, you've probably heard part of this verse at some point because it's one of the most frequently quoted Quran verses in the West. After every Islamic terrorist attack, politicians and journalists remind us that such attacks are un-Islamic because the Quran declares that if anyone kills a man, it's as if he's killed all mankind. They never quote the complete verse, of course, and they almost never give the reference, because if they gave the reference, someone might read the complete verse, and even worse, might read the very next verse. Watch what happens when we read the entire verse. This is how Surah 5, verse 32 is usually quoted to us by politicians and journalists. If anyone killed a person, it would be as if he killed all mankind. Sometimes they include a bit more, telling us that the Quran says, if anyone killed a person, it would be as if he killed all mankind, and if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of all mankind. But let's see what politicians and journalists leave out. Because of that, we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder or to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of all mankind. And indeed, there came to them our messengers with clear proofs, evidences, and signs. Even then, after that, many of them continued to exceed the limits, e.g. by doing oppression unjustly and exceeding beyond the limits set by Allah by committing the major sins in the land. Notice 4 things about this verse. 1, the Quran says that this was a revelation for Jews, the children of Israel. We ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder or to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind. And we know what the Quran is referring to here. This is a quotation from a Jewish rabbi in the Talmud. The Quran says that Allah ordained this for the children of Israel. Politicians and journalists omit the part about the children of Israel so that they can pretend that Islam calls for endless peace and tolerance. Meanwhile, the very next verse, Surah 5, verse 33, is a revelation for Muslims, and it commands Muslims to dismember and kill and crucify all kinds of people. So, 533 justifies terrorism. Politicians and journalists ignore it and go to 532. They do a bit of editing, and there you have it. Islam is a religion of peace. 2, since this is the standard verse quoted by Muslim apologists and politicians and journalists to show that Islam is a religion of peace, we should always point out that the most peaceful verse in the Quran is actually a quotation from the Talmud. 3, the Quran says that this Jewish teaching is a revelation from Allah. So according to the Quran, the Talmud, or at least a portion of it, is a revelation from Allah, just as the Torah and the Gospel, according to the Quran, are revelations from Allah. Commentary from a rabbi in the Talmud is revelation from Allah. Good to know. 4, the Quran says that there was an exception to the rule against killing, and that Jews could execute people for spreading mischief in the land. If anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder or to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind. So, Jews, according to the Quran, had authority from Allah to carry out capital punishment for certain crimes committed in the land. Pop quiz for those of you who read the Quran. Which land is the Quran referring to here? Is it A, Canada, B, China, C, Switzerland, or D, Israel? Allah, according to the Quran, gave the children of Israel authority over the land of Israel. Yes, Allah is a Zionist who says that the children of Israel have the right to punish people for spreading mischief in the land. Can you think of anyone who's been spreading mischief in the land? Next verse, Surah 5, verse 43. The historical background of this verse is that some Jews came to Muhammad to judge a dispute. Allah responded by saying to Muhammad, "But how do they come to you, Muhammad, for decision while they have the Torah, in which is the plain decision of Allah? Yet even after that, they turn away, for they are not really believers." Allah wanted to know why Jews would come to Muhammad when they already had the Torah. Muhammad gives a dramatic illustration of Allah's point in Sunan Abu Dawud 4449, where we see Muhammad's reaction to the Jews coming to him for judgment. In 7th century Arabia, the person who judged a dispute would sit on a judgment cushion. Watch what Muhammad does. They set out a cushion for the Messenger of Allah, and he sat on it. Then he said, "Bring me the Torah." It was brought, and he took the cushion from beneath him and placed the Torah on it and said, "I believe in you and in the one who revealed you." So the Jews bring a copy of the Torah. Muhammad takes the judgment cushion out from under him and puts the Torah on the judgment cushion. Muhammad speaks to the Torah and says, "I believe in you and in the one who revealed you." According to the Quran, do Jews need Muhammad's revelations? No, because they already have the Torah. The Quran, then, is useless to Jews according to the Quran itself. Notice also that both Muhammad and Allah affirm the inspiration, preservation, and continuing authority of the Torah. Third verse, Surah 5, verse 82. "Verily, you will find the strongest among men in enmity to the believers, i.e. Muslims, the Jews, and those who are al-mushrikun. Mushrikun are people who associate partners with Allah. And you will find the nearest in love to the believers, i.e. Muslims, those who say, 'We are Christians.' That is because amongst them are priests and monks, and they are not proud." So, the greatest enemies of Muslims, according to Surah 5, verse 82 of the Quran, are Jews and those who associate partners with Allah. And the closest in love to Muslims are Christians. Oddly enough, Jews and Christians are different groups from the mushriks here. Jews and Christians don't associate partners with Allah. Later in the Quran, when Allah has to justify violently subjugating Jews and Christians, he declares that Jews and Christians are, in fact, mushriks. It's interesting how Allah's eternal word, the Quran, changed depending on how Muhammad was feeling. When Muhammad began receiving revelations in Mecca, the message of the Quran was, it's Muslims, Jews, and Christians united as monotheists against the polytheists. Later, Muhammad and his followers moved to Medina, and it was a very important test for Muhammad because he had just spent a decade telling his followers that the Jews would accept him as a prophet. Muhammad had assured his followers that there were prophecies about him in the Torah, book of Trust Me Bro, chapter Just Take My Word for It. But now that the Muslim community had moved to Medina, where there were 3 tribes of Jews, Muslims finally had an opportunity to see if Muhammad was right. In a shocking blow to Muhammad's ego, the Jews rejected him as a prophet and mocked him for his ignorance. That's when the message of the Quran changed to Muslims and Christians are united against pagans and Jews, as we read in Surah 5, verse 82. Eventually, Christians also rejected him as a prophet, so the message of Islam became, it's Muslims against everyone. So Surah 5, verse 82 is from the middle period when there was still hope that Christians would accept Muhammad. Again, it's strange that an eternal book would be so heavily influenced by Muhammad's interactions with non-Muslims. Sadly, the Quran's claim that Jews are among the greatest enemies of Islam because they rejected Muhammad has had a lasting impact on many Muslims and even on their view of future events. In Sahih Muslim, number 7339, Muhammad says, "The hour, the day of judgment, will not begin until the Muslims fight the Jews, and the Muslims will kill them, until a Jew hides behind a rock or a tree, and the rock or tree will say, 'O Muslim, O slave of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him.'" Putting all of this together, the Quran says that Jews were given not only revelations from Allah, including the Torah and the Talmud, but also a piece of land where Jews can enforce their laws against those who make mischief. The Quran says that Jews don't need Muhammad because they have the Torah, the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of Allah. But for some reason, even though Muhammad and the Quran are useless to Jews, they're still supposed to acknowledge Muhammad as a prophet. Since they don't, Islam declares that Jews will be the enemies of Muslims until Muslims kill them to usher in the end times. Not very comforting, but that's what we find when we read the Muslim sources. Now, if I were a Jew, and I knew what Islam teaches about Jews, and I saw the impact that Muhammad's teachings have on the world, I would probably spend some time responding to what the Quran says about me and my family and my community. And if anyone asked me, "Why are you criticizing the Quran?" I would calmly reply, "Look, the Quran talked about me and my family and my community long before I said a word about the Quran. And if you don't think that I have every right to respond to Islam's most trusted sources calling for our violent subjugation, you have my full permission to cry me a river. I am not, never have been, and never will be your dhimmi." Deal with it.